This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on October 31st, 2025, and then die as a result of his head injury on November 5th, 2025. And it is also predicting that Michelle Obama will return to the White House and be inaugurated as the 49th president on January 20th, 2029. And her vice president in the White House on this day will be Barack Obama. The date that this video is posted on the social media platform that you are watching this on proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will fall and injure his head severely on October 31st, 2025, and that he will die from his head injury on November 5th, 2025. And it is predicted that Michelle Obama will return to the White House as the president on January 20th, 2029. The signs that I'll be explaining, the prophetic signs from God that I'll be explaining in this video, are what reveal these predictions. So this is how this is known ahead of time, and these reasons will be clear and straightforward and will demonstrate that these predictions are known through the God of the Bible, the righteous Christian God of the Bible. These profound reasons will prove that a human being such as myself did not concoct these reasons, these ways of knowing these dates ahead of time for these predictions. No one could create these reasons. No one is creative enough. No human being has the imagination or creativity to develop such profound explanations for how these dates are known. And also, the date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are known ahead of time, as does this email in which I wrote the reasons, which, as you can see, is time-stamped October 6th. Okay, the email was composed on October 6th. If you're skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward this to you. All right, and so again, just to repeat, the reasons, as you will see, cannot be created ahead of time. It is impossible for someone to retro date a video on YouTube, for example. If you think that's possible, it isn't. But if you are somehow inclined to think that I must have a connection in YouTube, inside YouTube or something to that effect, well, the date of the email proves this, as do the explanations. And so it is completely irrational for the ardent, radical, agnostic atheist, because it is a religion that is irrational, to maintain their irrationality and conclude that I must have, made these predictions somehow before the dates. Afterwards. And if you think that I got lucky here with these explanations, well, that's even more crazy, more irrational. Okay, because of course these explanations could not have been created for a date ahead of time for these predictions, and let alone similar explanations for every date of the calendar year, which is what would be required if someone were trying to do this by luck, which makes the person that thinks that completely nuts. Okay, so the title of this email, it's of course like every video and every email title. It has to be titled something, but it is about far more than just this. Okay, well, for the sake of a title here, because it's God's true big picture of signs. and the full intended meaning of any of God's prophetic signs cannot be fully or properly understood without their context and connections with the other prophetic signs, which is something that is missed by the majority of those who claim to watch for God's signs, which is why the vast majority of God's signs are completely missed by those who are watching, quote unquote. Okay, so let's begin here with what I wrote here. A tornado on June 20th, 2025 was just upgraded to EF5, okay? The category of intensity EF5. And this was composed on October 6th, and so I think it was on October 6th, or maybe the day before, that the National Weather Service upgraded this particular tornado that occurred back in June to EF5. It was the first EF5 tornado in 3 times 4 years, which hints at for 3 transgressions and for 4. Okay, so why don't we get this out of the way right here. Paul Simon is symbolism for this Hebrew idiom in the Bible, in the book of Amos, in the 1st chapter, which is for 3 transgressions and for 4. And this idiom means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment and destruction are unavoidable. The reason, the logic behind the idiom meaning, because of course idioms don't mean what they literally say. That's the definition of an idiom. But in ancient Israel, 3 would have represented completion or reaching the limit. And so that's why for 3 transgressions and for 4, this phrase that God is saying through the prophet Amos. Now, Simon and Garfunkel were first signed by Wally Amos, the founder of famous Amos cookies. And Wally Amos lured Simon and Garfunkel into his office through a gift of cookies. And then he went on to found the world's biggest cookie company in history, which is because it's a sign from God. Because famous Amos hints at the famous prophet Amos in the Bible. In the 1st chapter is this repetition of this Hebrew idiom. And also, it's in context of Tyre, ancient Tyre, which is symbolism in the Bible for America. And that's because, like America, ancient Tyre was strong and prosperous because it was protected, surrounded by ocean. It wasn't until Alexander the Great built a causeway from the mainland to the island of Tyre that it was conquered. All right, and so now the idiom is repeated in the 1st chapter of Amos. Oh, and after Amos signed them, their first album was Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Wednesday is the 4th day of the week, which gives us this 3 and 4 here. Also, 3 a.m. was the beginning of what was in ancient Israel the 4th night watch. So, for 3 transgressions and for 4 is hinted at with the first album that was produced after they were signed by the first agent to sign them, Wally Amos, which hints at famous Amos the prophet and this Hebrew idiom. Also, Simon's prophetic dream, in which he says he was instructed by a voice to create his new album and to name it 7 Psalms, occurred on the date 115. And that's because this idiom appears in the 1st chapter of Amos, and it's repeated in this chapter that has 15 verses. In other words, this is very significant to Paul Simon, this 3 and 4. which is why this, for example, EF5 tornado occurred exactly, or not exactly, but occurred 3 times 4 years after the prior EF5 tornado. Okay, and this 3 times 4 years is also 4 plus 4 plus 4 years. This tornado on June 20th, 2025 is exactly 43 months before the predicted inauguration on January 20th, 2029, and the return of the 44th president to the White House. Okay? The White House mansion. And Paul Simon's best solo album was about a mansion, or titled after a mansion. Elvis's The King's Mansion, which hints at the King Antichrist in the White House mansion, the 44th president, in the mansion that has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, that is located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. Hence, again, why the 4 plus 4 plus 4 months, or sorry, years connection. Okay? And as you will see, as I'll explain more here, the tornado back in 2013 was 4 years and 4 months after the inauguration of the 44th president in 2009. Exactly. But I'm jumping ahead now. Okay, so the EF5 that was upgraded on June 20th was exactly 5 months after Trump's inauguration at the White House mansion. This is 2 plus 3 months. 2 plus 3 months and 4 plus 4 plus 4 years is a pairing of 23 and 44, which God pairs frequently to confirm the signs and connections. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which he would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 23 and 44. And I know these are the numbers because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. And the reason for 23 and 44 being paired together to establish his big picture of signs is that the 44th president was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. And speaking of the White House mansion, the basketball president constructed a basketball court at the White House mansion. Trump's inauguration was associated with weather. The inauguration was held indoors because of record cold temperatures not seen since the 40th president's inauguration 44 years earlier, which further hints at the Antichrist 44th president. Because in general, Trump is a trumpet that God is using to trumpet the coming of the Antichrist, the 44th president, which is why, for example, Trump's rise in political popularity coincided with him calling out the 44th president for being an illegal president who committed fraud by claiming that he wasn't born, that he was born in the U.S. Additionally, there were flurries at the time of the inauguration in the 6 plus 6 plus 6th state along the Gulf Coast on the first day of the renaming of the Gulf of America, which coincided with Trump's flurry of executive orders. Because that was a prophetic sign, right? The headlines were Trump signs a flurry quote, flurry of executive orders on the day of this unprecedented flurries along the Gulf Coast, which he had just renamed the Gulf of America. But it was specifically New Orleans also that received this snow, these flurries, and this is in the 6+6+6th state. Well, New Orleans is relevant to Paul Simon because in the song Graceland, he sings about traveling down the highway to Memphis, Tennessee, and the mansion, and he would have been starting his journey from New Orleans. But also, Paul Simon has a famous song named America from his fourth Simon and Garfunkel album, which is further confirmation or a hint at the 44th president in the White House mansion. The Antichrist 666. That's why he started the journey up the I-55 to the White House mansion. Sorry, the Graceland mansion. Now the I-55, well, now I'm getting into, more tangents, but that also connects all the way to Chicago from New Orleans. And the Antichrist is from Chicago. But it goes through Memphis, and the most wicked king in the Bible, King Manasseh, ruled for Israel for 55 years, which is a hint at the most wicked president in America, who is from Chicago, which connects to Memphis and New Orleans with the I-55. It also connects to St. Louis, which is where it is predicted a plane crash will occur that will enable Barack Obama to return to the White House. In the summer, in August of 2028, the Democrat Party nominee will die in a plane crash in St. Louis, and in an emergency, they will nominate Michelle Obama, who will make Barack Obama her vice president, and then later she will step down and Barack Obama will become the president again in the White House mansion. Also, in the Bible, Satan and demon, the word, is mentioned 55 times. Okay, so anyway, we are connecting Trump's inauguration here too with New Orleans even, because again, it was about record cold temperatures, but the news stories were about how this hadn't been done, the inauguration having been moved indoors since the 40th president's inauguration 44 years earlier. That also pairs with the 2 + 3 months from the inauguration to the EF5 tornado, which is also 2 + 3. You could call it the EF 2 + 3 tornado, 2 + 3 months. Okay, so the National Weather Service upgraded the tornado exactly 37 weeks, which hints at 3 sets of 7, after Trump's inauguration. And Trump is a trumpet because it's a parallel with the Bible and how Joshua, who led the Israelites around the walls of security of Jericho, before the walls of security collapsed, and the Israelites blew trumpets. But they did enact a symbolic 3 sets of 7 in the process. They marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. When Trump was inaugurated in the year ending in 7, he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. And that was 73 days after he won the election by 77 electoral votes. And 73 days also hints at 3 sets of 7. He won by 77 electoral votes, exactly 73 weeks, which hints at 3 sets of 7, after his campaign began, when he famously descended the golden escalator in the Trumpet Tower, which was exactly 188 months after the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. Archaeology proves that the walls of security of Jericho collapsed after Joshua and the Israelites marched around them in 3 sets of 7 due to an earthquake. Hence the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. The reason for 188 months is because God uses this number frequently to point to H188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means woe exclamation mark, which is like a trumpet, if you will, a trumpet from God, woe exclamation mark. It is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. Okay, and so a tornado and its destruction is judgment from God, and this tornado was upgraded, and again, I forget the exact date, I think it was October 6th perhaps, exactly 37 weeks after Trump's inauguration, and Trump again is a trumpet. So, and Trump, by the way, speaking of the walls of security collapsing, his first campaign and presidency were synonymous with his border wall of security, which then collapsed in God's judgment after he left office. And then the invasion of 100 million, or no, 25 million, I think, illegal immigrants aided by the world, the unrighteous world, and the left in an invasion of America. Just like the Israelites invaded after the walls of security collapsed on Jericho. It's judgment and destruction. North Dakota is in the 39th state. 39 is equal to 3 times 13, which since at the date 313, or rather the year 313 AD, which was the year that Rome converted to Catholicism, and the Pope was elected the Pope on the date 313 in 13. So 39 is also 3 nines, and that gives us 999, but the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. As from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. And 999 also hints at 666, because when you flip the 9s upside down, it gives us 666. And so that's also the intended underlying symbolism in this tornado in the 39th state. The tornado in the 39th state was upgraded on October 6th, 2025, 40 weeks and 1 day after the death of the 39th president, who is symbolic of Methuselah in the Bible, who died at the time of the flood judgment beginning, which is symbolism for a weather event, and was a weather event. And so that's why the connection between the tornado in the 39th state, the weather event, and the death of the 39th president. But why 40 weeks and 1 day? Well, that hints at 401, which is the 22nd super prime number. 22 is the number that God uses to symbolize the mark of the Antichrist. Because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist, described in the book of Ezekiel, would have been a Tav mark, and the Tav letter is the last and 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Also, the mark changes a person's chromosomes, and a chromosome has 2 arms, and they come in pairs, and so 2 and 2. And so 40 weeks and 1 day is also 77%. This is a second witness to the relevance of 40 weeks and 1 day. And as I mentioned a minute ago, the way in which God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works is it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses. And so 40 weeks in one day is also 77% of a year. And it is exactly 69.99%. So we can safely assume that God is intending 77% here. And again, this is after the death. This connection of 77% of a year comes from the death of the president who was inaugurated in 77. Oh, I just remembered that I forgot to mention earlier that Paul Simon's song America is on Simon and Garfunkel's 4th album. Oh, no, never mind. Well, on that note, so speaking of the connection with 44 here, and the 44th president being the Antichrist of America, President of America, it comes from the album Bookends, because Paul Simon is the bookends. He opened the broadcast for the first Saturday Night Live broadcast after 9/11, and he also sang at the memorial on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. He is 9/11 symbolism, and 9/11 was a warning of judgment from God for America to turn back to God and repent, or else judgment, destruction, because it parallels Isaiah chapter 9, verse 11 in the Bible. Long story, as I explained countless other times. And so this period of grace and opportunity for America to repent will be symbolically over with the death of Paul Simon. He will be the bookend to the period of warning. And then at that time, when Paul Simon dies, it will be symbolism for 3 transgressions and for 4. Which again means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment and destruction are unavoidable, which means there is no more opportunity. It's over. The destruction is now going to come. And that will be what will be symbolized with the death of Paul Simon. That's the huge thing here. Okay, so back to what I was saying here. Paul Simon, incidentally, sang at the pre-inaugural ball on the date 119, which hints at 9/11, in the year 77, when the 39th president was inaugurated, which makes this 77 relevant. But also, Paul Simon's song Slip Slidin' Away is from his 4th solo album, which was released in 77, and Paul Simon is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head and then die. Okay, so back to what I was saying here. We have this connection from the upgrading of the tornado in the 39th state to the death of the 39th president. Okay, and this connection to Carter's inauguration in 77 confirms the connections from the tornado in the 39th state to Trump's inauguration on January 20th, 2025, and Michelle Obama's predicted inauguration on January 20th, 2029. Again, the connections are 5 months to the EF5 and 43 months from the first EF5 in 4 times 3 years to Michelle Obama, right? Again, Trump's inauguration was 5 months before the EF5 tornado, and the EF tornado was the first in 4 times 3 years, and it occurred 43 months before the predicted inauguration of Michelle Obama, which will bring with her the 44th president back into the White House, the Antichrist. And this is all amazing because Paul Simon is symbolism for 3 transgressions and for 4, which is, of course, what 43 months and 4 times 3 years hints at. Of course, it is also 3 times 4 years. But also Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., Wednesday is the fourth day of the week. That's a 4 and a 3. But it's essentially the same meaning as for 3 transgressions and for 4. And this is all astounding too, because Paul Simon is connected to Jimmy Carter through his performance at the inaugural ball of the song American Tune. Symbolism for the state of America. It's a melancholy song reminiscing and lamenting change in America that isn't for the better. In other words, it's a prophecy from God, this song, speaking of the state spiritually of America and where it is headed, which is judgment and destruction. Hence the destructive tornado sign here. The tornado was in the 39th state. The 39th president is symbolic of Methuselah. By the way, the reason why that is because Carter was the longest living president, and Methuselah is the oldest, longest living person in the Bible, Noah's grandfather. And when he died is the day or the time of the beginning of the flood. And so that's why, okay, and so the symbolism here is that when Carter dies, who is symbolism for Methuselah, it's symbolic of the flood judgment beginning. It's the same symbolism as Paul Simon. When he dies, like I am saying, it will be symbolism for 3 transgressions and for 4, and judgment and destruction being unavoidable, just like the death of Carter. So it makes sense that Carter and Simon come together at the inauguration of Carter on the date 119, which hints at 9/11 and the warning, which Paul Simon is symbolism for, and their deaths come together too prophetically here. And speaking of which, Simon's predicted death will be 44 weeks and 4 days after Jimmy Carter died. And again, that's relevant because the number 4 in God's signs is associated with Paul Simon, one reason being for 3 transgressions and for 4. And also all of this leading to the 44th president's return to the White House mansion, and Paul Simon's song about the Graceland mansion is symbolism for this. It hints at this. Again, the Graceland mansion was the mansion of the king of rock and roll in Memphis, Tennessee, named after Memphis, Egypt, the mansion being symbolism for the king of Egypt's palace. And the Israelites escaped persecution from the king of Egypt after 400 years, and then crossed into the promised land after 40 years, which hints at the 44th president. And in the Bible, the king of Egypt is symbolism for the Antichrist. That's why the king's mansion sung about by Paul Simon hints at the White House mansion and the 44th president in the White House that has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms and is located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, another thing about the 5 months here to the EF5 is that Paul Simon points to the 5th trumpet of judgment that follows the sound of silence in heaven in Revelation 8:1. Paul Simon's big hit that launched his career and is one of the most famous American songs internationally of all time, Sound of Silence, hints at Revelation 8:1 and the sound of silence that was heard in heaven that preceded the 7 trumpet judgments, which is why Simon's recent album is titled 7 Psalms. and why the connection to Trump. And also the reason for Paul Simon's big hit, Late in the Evening, which is a name in itself that hints at the opportunity of judgment running out, opportunity to repent for America to running out. And this song is known for its heavy use of trumpets. Okay. By the way, that's also the reason for Simon being a part of the inauguration in 77. But the fifth trumpet judgment speaks also about a period of 5 months in which demons will possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. That's what's being described there. And the possession of people for 5 months through the mark of the Antichrist will be triggered by 5G frequencies. And music is frequencies. The demons in the fifth trumpet that emerge from the bottomless pit come through an unlocked door with a key, and Paul Simon was born in 41. The word key is equal to 41 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. And music composition involves keys, music keys, and Paul Simon is known as the GOAT, greatest of all time, which God uses for signs of pop music composition. And his biggest or best-selling solo album, Graceland, has a song, Graceland, in which the first lyric is, "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar." Well, the 5G frequencies will trigger the transistors, if you will, inside the brains of people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist because of the components in the mark of the Antichrist that were put into them. And this will facilitate or engender delta brain waves, which will facilitate demonic possession. The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar, first lyric of the song, hints at demonic possession because the word shining hints at possession of demonically. Because Paul Simon famously dated the actress Shelley Duvall, who starred in the movie The Shining, and Simon famously broke up with her at the airport, as in portal, as in door, through to the demonic realm that is unlocked, that the demons pass through to demonically possess people. He broke up with her at the airport before she flew to the UK to film the movie The Shining, which is a movie about demonic possession. But it is also about the demonic possession of a very large hotel, which is symbolism for a mansion. And that's tying back to Paul Simon, who sings about the Mississippi Delta shining like a national guitar in his song about the Graceland mansion. It also just occurred to me, and it always happens when I'm going through the information, but this is very important. The EF5 tornado is wind. It is air. As the Bible says, the prince of the power of the air. Satan is the prince of the power of the air, which is why the airplane of Shelley Duvall and the frequencies in the air with music, which is also the reason for 5G frequencies being the facilitator of the demonic possession for 5 months. And so that's the meaning here with this tornado in the 39th state, because, again, the 39th president connects with Paul Simon as also with the song American Tune. So the tornado is more prince of the power of the air symbolism, and the coming demonic possession from the prince of the power of the air is described in the fifth trumpet judgment, which will use 5G frequencies to facilitate the demonic possession for 5 months. And Paul Simon, who is a musician, and music is frequencies in the air, is predicted to die from a head injury, which is symbolic of the brain injury, or sorry, symbolic of the demonic possession of people's brains. And Paul Simon in God's Signs is also associated with the number 5. Because the name Paul is equal to 50 in Simple English Gematria, and Paul Simon and Garfunkel's famous reunion concert in Central Park raised $50,000 for Central Park, and it was exactly 500 months after the release of Paul Simon's 7 Psalms album, which since the 7 trumpets, that includes the 5th trumpet judgment. And the name Paul Simon is equal to 500 in Hebrew Gematria, and Paul Simon's only solo number 1 hit as a solo artist was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, and Paul Simon has produced a total of 5 plus 5 plus 5 solo albums, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And Paul Simon has produced a total of 50 albums, and Paul Simon traveled up the I-55 highway that I explained earlier, which connects New Orleans to Memphis and Chicago. And so anyway, that's why it all is associated with Paul Simon here. This wind thing, air, Prince of the Power of the Air, the E5 tornado that was upgraded, that occurred, I should say, exactly 5 months after Trumpet's inauguration. And by the way, blowing into a trumpet is air. That's also wind. That's interesting. I'd never thought of that. Is a tornado actually symbolism for blowing into a trumpet? Because blowing into a trumpet is wind. I will say this. Hurricane Beryl, the prophetic Hurricane Beryl in the summer of 2024, made landfall on the Yucatan Peninsula with 110 mile-per-hour winds, which hints at Joshua, who led the Israelites around the walls of security before they collapsed in God's judgment after they blew trumpets. And Joshua died at the age of 110. This is also, by the way, why the towers that collapsed, as in the walls of security that collapsed, were 110 stories high, and their collapse engendered an earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, and on and on. But anyway, when you look at a map, it's clear that the shape of the geographical outline of the nation of Mexico is a shofar horn, a trumpet. And so this hurricane with 110-mile winds blew into the mouthpiece of the shofar with the Yucatan Peninsula. Well, why is Mexico a shofar trumpet shape? Because Mexico is the other side of the border wall of security, and trumpets were blown when the walls of security of Jericho collapsed. And again, God's trumpet, symbolizes all of this, which is why his first campaign and presidency were synonymous with his border wall of security, and why he trumpeted his inauguration on the 70th, when he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. And as I explained earlier, it all connects back to the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. Okay, and so that's why this is an example, in other words, of wind symbolizing blowing into a trumpet. And so it very well could be that the tornado here is also like a trumpeting. In fact, I now think it is. And there's more to come here, as I'll explain. Stay tuned. It's going to get much more interesting even. The tornado was in the 39th state. The 39th president is symbolic of Methuselah, who is symbolic of the flood, which is a weather event. A tornado is a weather event. 39 is equal to 3 times 13, which hints at the year 313 AD, when Rome converted to Catholicism, And the first of the two antichrists, Pope Francis, was elected on the date 313 in the year 13. The 39th president was the first president, and God uses firsts for prophetic signs, to host a pope, which is Antichrist, at the White House. I will repeat it again. I repeat it so many times, but it is astounding how so many people and so-called Protestants don't know that one of the primary motivations for the Reformation was the knowledge that the Pope is the Antichrist. And of course he is, for anyone who has any wisdom, because Catholicism isn't Christianity. It isn't the Bible. It is man-made religion on top of the Bible. And when Rome converted in 313, which is why God uses this in his signs, and why the Pope was elected on the date 313, it's because of 313 AD, when Rome converted to Catholicism. It didn't do away at the time with its pagan religions and traditions and rituals. It just repackaged them into a form that made it look like Christianity. In other words, Catholicism is pagan religion made to look like Christianity or the Bible. It's deception. It's how the devil works. If we think about it, the devil, the liar of lies, would, in faced with the gospel, attempt to create a counterfeit version of it that made it look like Christianity and seem like it, but wasn't. It's a parallel directly with the Bible. The thing that God hates most in the Old Testament is false religious worship. The ancient Jews were constantly being chastised for mixing the true religion with the pagan religion of their neighbors. It was a mix. And that's what Catholicism is. It's a mix of the Bible and pagan religion. And God hates this. The Apostle Peter, who incidentally was never in Rome, called Rome cryptically Babylon, because Babylon is the home of pagan religion, ancient Babylon. And Rome was the pagan city of the day. And it didn't do away with its paganism in the year 313 AD. It then chose to make it look like Christianity. Anyway, there will be some Catholics who are on the path of being saved, but when they are, or when they will be, it will be in spite of their Catholicism and not because of it. And also, God speaks to the Catholic Church through the Church of Thyatira, because the 7 churches in the book of Revelation represent the 7 stages of church history. And the 4th one, the Church of Thyatira, represents the medieval Catholic Church. And to this church, who love the teachings of Jezebel, he's going to throw them into tribulation. Who is Jezebel? She was the promoter of pagan religion in ancient Israel. She was the queen of mixing the pagan religion with the true religion. Jezebel. And so that's the Church of Thyatira. Now, have I said enough regarding this subject here for now? And Pope Francis, well, he will be resurrected in April of 2029. He is the Antichrist. And the demons pretending to be aliens will claim that Pope Francis has been made the ambassador for the world, and they will resurrect him, which is also Antichrist, because the devil's strategy is to counterfeit. It's to invert, to turn things upside down, the opposite. And so the Antichrist will be a mimic of the resurrection of Jesus. And then the Antichrist will promote the mark of the Antichrist, which will also promise immortality. The first lie told at the beginning of the age will also be the last lie, at the closing of the age. Okay, so what I was saying here is that the tornado occurred in the 39th state, and this, the 39th president is symbolic of Methuselah, symbolic of a flood, and was a weather event. And the 39th, and the number 39 hints at Pope Francis, ultimately here, because it's 3 times 13, which hints at 313 AD, and Pope Francis's election on the date 313. The 39th president was the first, and God uses firsts for prophetic signs, president to host a pope at the White House. So that's the importance of President Carter here. He was the first to recognize. This nation of America was never supposed to recognize a pope. It was founded on the Reformation and those that were even seeking to get away from the Church of England, which was still too much like the Catholic Church, which is why they were persecuted and had to flee to the New World. It was to get away from, essentially, the Catholic Church. They were escaping religious persecution from the King of England, just like the Israelites escaped persecution from the King of Egypt, who then crossed the Jordan River, and that's why the Pilgrims saw their crossing of the Atlantic to their promised land, the New World, as analogous to the ancient Israelites. And the King of England, I'll just repeat it, was the head of the Church of England, which was very much the same thing as Roman Catholicism. And that's why these true reformers, these true Christians, had to leave. And so the fact that we have this... Oh, and the other thing too is that Carter presented himself as a Christian and was constantly moralizing. And that's why the Democrat Party nominated him, because they saw him as the way to reach the middle voters because of his supposed Christianity. Because otherwise, the Democrat Party has, left God at that time in history, departed from God. But they chose Carter strategically for this very reason, because of his professing Christianity. But Carter is also the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. He isn't a Christian. Make no mistake, Jimmy Carter is not a Christian. He is not in good standing. I don't know where he is right now. But he was an enemy of God. And that's because of his politics and because of his association with the Democrat Party and everything. It was all phony. He was the epitome of a quote-unquote Christian that was against everything that God was for, in a way. So, and that's why this man was used to be the first to host a pope, to get the ball rolling here, to begin the process of forgetting how it is that the Reformation was because of the knowledge that the Pope is the Antichrist. And I'll just add this. To those evangelicals that love to play the Antichrist guessing game, please stop. When this prediction comes to pass, it'll prove everything that I am saying in this video. And believe me, I know far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. Make no mistake. I could give you an hour's worth of reasons for the things that I'm saying, but I need to move on. And so I need to be blunt and hammer you with the truth because I need to be quick here. You should know by now that the Pope is the Antichrist, and it is, it is, in my opinion, inexcusable that any quote-unquote Christian does not know that the Pope is the Antichrist. It's inexcusable. Any true Christian, this is basic Christianity. Christianity 101. And anyone that doesn't know that has very little wisdom in general. And that includes Catholics and Protestants that don't know this. Because they therefore don't know much about the Bible even, and how Catholicism is pagan religion. It's very simple. It's very clear. It's just a surface level understanding of history even. And so for those who play the evangelicals that love to play the guessing game based on their heretical misinterpretation of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which they claim that the identity of the Antichrist is not knowable until supposedly the Holy Spirit is removed, which is absurd. There's no moment where there will be no Holy Spirit on earth. There will be people after the rapture, let's put it this way, because that's what they're thinking, that supposedly after the rapture, the Holy Spirit is removed from earth and no man alive will have a Holy Spirit. It's so absurd, right? But their understanding of the rapture is completely wrong too, in their dispensationalism, which is also heretical and based on the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth and those that teach and have the works that are product of this doctrine. But I don't want to get onto that subject. I'm just focusing here on 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And anyway, what Paul was referring to when he referred to this he and a what that's holding back the Antichrist, he wasn't referring to the Holy Spirit. Why would he refer to the Holy Spirit as a he and a what? Why refer to it as a he and a what? Also, why did he speak cryptically? And why did he tell in the letter that the Thessalonians knew what he was talking about? Why did he speak so cryptically? Especially since he said they knew what he was talking about. Well, the answer is because anyone in possession of the letter would have been in danger had he been speaking plainly about Roman Catholicism and Rome. The he and the what that were holding back the Antichrist was Constantine and the capital of the Roman Empire and it being relocated to Constantinople. Paul prophesied that would happen. And when that happened, when the he and the what were removed, it led to the rise in power of the bishops of Rome, who became popes. Okay. And so, anyway, enough of the guessing game. The main focus of God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass, is the identity of the Antichrists. So, if you're playing the guessing game and you claim to be a watcher of God's signs, no offense, but you don't know very much if you don't know that his signs are revealing the identity of the Antichrists and have been for many years. But even without these signs, we should know who these men are. Like I said, the Reformation wouldn't have occurred without the knowledge of the first of the two Antichrists. And since the arrival of Barack Obama, it should be very clear that he is the second of the two antichrists who gets his power from the first. And no, it is not the other way around for those that think that. No, the false prophet is not the Pope because he's a spiritual guy. That's not what is intended by that phrase, the false prophet. The false prophet, by the way, speaks like a dragon. And what is Barack Obama known for? Why did he get elected? For his ability to speak and deliver a speech with a teleprompter, if you recall. How miserable he did when he didn't have a teleprompter during his first election run. But anyway, he speaks like a dragon. He is the false prophet. Okay, so back to what I was saying. Now, where was I? The tornado in the 39th state and the 39th president. He was the first to have the Pope because of 39 hinting at Pope Francis, as I explained. Now, that date that Jimmy Carter hosted John Paul the second, was it the second? I guess it was. On October 6th, 1979, was exactly 2 times 23 years before the upgrade of the tornado in the 39th state on October 6th, 2025. You see, the 39th state tornado connects with the 39th president hosting the Pope. And again, the 39 hints at the Pope. That's why I have an exclamation mark right here. Now, how is 2 times 23 years significant? This hints at the mark of the Antichrist, which changes a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes, as in 2 times 23. It's altered. They're altered. That's what makes it a mark. And what it is people have inserted into their chromosomes snake venom chromosomes. Because the truth is, the protruding amino acid of the CVD disease, VIRUS, is snake venom put onto a bat VIRUS in a laboratory. The whatever you want to call them, the scientists, I guess, they have been experimenting with snake venom for medicinal purposes for many decades. And anyway, to make this deadly virus, they decided to put a snake venom onto it. Anyway, also the mark of the Antichrist, the thing that was used to supposedly counter this VIRUS, used snake venom, synthesized snake venom. And that was inserted into people's chromosomes. That was the technology, right? The CRISPR technology that had never before been used on humans. And when it had been used in experiments on animals, always failed miserably in disaster. But yet miraculously, it was supposed to have worked after the CVD disease all of a sudden, for the first time, in an emergency, very quickly. But of course it didn't, and it ended in disaster, which has been suppressed by the cult of the left, the satanic religious cult of the political left. Anyway, the biggest symbol in the Bible of evil and the devil is the snake, and so that's why they've been marked by Satan. So that's why exactly 2 times 23 years between the Pope's visit with Carter, the 39th president, and the 39th state tornado being upgraded by the National Weather Service, symbolism for America, and weather being symbolism for the flood, and Carter being symbolism for the flood through Methuselah. See, it all goes around. It's circular. It's amazing. The first pope at the White House was in the White House in the year 79, which is the 22nd prime number. And again, as I mentioned, the number 22 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. This is also, again, obviously, 2 times 23 years is 46 years. 46 years is also the 4 times 4th semi-prime number of years, which hints at the 44th president and the Pope at the White House. Which, by the way, I'm jumping ahead because I didn't recognize it when I wrote this email, but recognized it later. When the 2 antichrists met at the White House, it was 36 years, almost exactly, because it was in the autumn. One was late September and the other was early October. "36 years because 36 hints at 3 sixes and 666. This connection alone identifies the Pope and Barack Obama as the 2 antichrists in Bible prophecy, which incidentally are described in the 13th chapter of Revelation, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and the 39th president hints at 13 plus 13 plus 13. And the number 666 appears in the 13th chapter of Revelation. And so from the 39th president, in other words, the 13 plus 13 plus 13th president, it is 666 symbolism to the 2 antichrists at the White House. And so you get the idea here. But also, 36 is also symbolic of 666, more so than being because it is 3 sixes. It is also 6 times 6, and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the last number in the triangle of numbers with 36 rows is 666. And the number 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. The tornado was upgraded on the date 10/6, which hints at 10 times 6 equals 60, which hints at 6. And it was 3,666 days after the 2 antichrists met at the White House on September 23rd, 2015, which is again 6 times 6 years after the first Pope visited the 39th president at the White House. That's amazing. The 39th state tornado was upgraded on the date 10/6, which hints at 6, and it was 3,666 days after the 2 antichrists met at the White House. Wow. The tornado was in Enderlin, North Dakota. Enderlin, North Dakota is equal to 9 times 11 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. This hints at Revelation 9:11, which is the verse that symbolizes the coming mass demonic possession that's described in the 5th trumpet that will be triggered or facilitated through 5G frequencies for 5 months. Hence the EF5 tornado. The tornado was upgraded to having 70 plus 70 plus 70 miles per hour maximum wind speeds, exactly 37, as in 3 sets of 7 weeks after Trump's inauguration and the flurries along the America's border with the Gulf, which is at Joshua 3 sets of 7 around the walls of security, right? On the day of the border wall of security. On the day of Trump's inauguration in 2017, he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. So I just wanted to add this second witness here, because the tornado had 70 plus 70 plus 70 mile winds, and it was upgraded exactly 3 sets of 7, 37 weeks after Trump's inauguration. And on Trump's first inauguration, and Trump's inauguration was about the border wall of security on the Gulf. Trump's first inauguration was about his border wall of security with the nation Mexico, which is shaped like a trumpet. And it was in the year 7, ending in 7, and he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old at the time. I went through that earlier. And again, it connected all the way back to the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. And so that's amazing too, the wind speeds, because the upgrade is because of the wind speeds. That's what makes it an EF5, the wind speeds. And so it's relevant, the wind speed number, which is prophetic because it's 70 plus 70 plus 70. 3 sets of 7, and it was exactly 37 weeks after trumpet. And by the way, the trumpet inauguration was on the same day that the Gulf of Mexico was renamed. And again, Mexico is the shape of a trumpet. There were 3 deaths in the tornado. The National Weather Service upgraded the tornado from EF3 3 days after P. Diddy was sentenced for abusing his ex-girlfriend, Cassie. The tornado was in Enderlin in Cass County. Part of the city Enderlin is also in Ransom County. Jesus Christ paid the ransom to the ruler of this world, whose power over people is death. God uses records for signs. The period between the 2 recent EF5 tornadoes on May 20th, 2013 and June 20th, 2025 is a record drought for EF5 tornadoes. Okay, so earlier I was talking about the 4 plus 4 plus 4 years, or 3 times 4 years. But this is the exact connection. May 20th, 13 to June 20th, 25. And this period was a record, and God uses records for signs. It was a record drought for EF5 tornadoes. So much for supposed climate change that is supposedly making weather more extreme, which is a lie from Satan. Because people who worship false religions get the deception they ask for and believe the lies that they want to believe. And leftist politics is a religion. And one of the branches of that religion is environmentalism. As Chesterton said, this is a quote. This is just a paraphrase. But when people stop worshiping God, they don't worship nothing, they worship anything. In other words, they become pagan. They start worshiping the creation instead of the creator, like the pagans, such as environmentalism. The EF5 tornado on June 20th, 2025 was exactly 145 months after the EF5 tornado on May 20th, 2013. Okay? As you can see, they're both on the 20th of the month. This was a signal for myself right away that this must be very relevant and very prophetic. It's through the tornado in June of 2025 that God was in fact pointing back to the other prophetic tornado. And what does that mean? Well, I'm about to explain. But first of all, the interval period of 145 months hints at 188 because 188 is the 145th composite number, which simply means a non-prime number. And like I mentioned earlier, God repeats this number in his signs, 188, for H188, which means whoa, exclamation mark. Again, it was exactly 188 months between the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California, and the day that Trump descended the golden escalator. Both of those dates were on the 16th of the month. It was exactly 188 months. And again, Trump is associated with Joshua because of the trumpets that were blown when Joshua led the Israelites around the border wall of security. 145 is also the 110th composite number. Okay, so the 145th composite number is 188, but the 110th composite number is 145. And that's the number associated with Joshua, because he died at the age of 110 in the Bible. And he led the Israelites before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment, which is symbolic of a tornado's destruction, causing structures and buildings to collapse. EF5 hints at E5, F6, the sixth letter of the alphabet, E, the fifth letter, and 5 is 5. And so it hints at 5 plus 6 plus 5, which equals 16, which equals 4 times 4. The relative lack of fatalities from the EF5 tornado in Moore, Oklahoma on May 20th, 2013 is the 4 times 4th semi-prime number state, in the 4 times 4th semi-prime number state, the 46th state. And the relative lack of fatalities was attributed to a 4 times 4 minute lead time on the tornado given by the National Weather Service. The tornado on May 20th, 2013 touched down at 2:56 p.m. 256 is 4 to the power of 4. 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. And it was exactly 4 years and 4 months after the inauguration of the 44th president. Wow. Let me repeat that. The 44th president was inaugurated 4 years and 4 months before the tornado that touched down at the number of time that hints at 4 to the power of 4. And there was a relative lack of fatalities due to the 4 times 4 minute lead time by the National Weather Service. And this was in the 4 times 4th semi-prime number state. And EF5 hints at 4 times 4. And it was the last EF5 until the recent one. By the way, the 110th prime composite, which is what is hinted at with the 145 months between the two tornadoes, that's more confirmation that tornadoes are wind symbolism for blowing trumpets, because Joshua led the Israelites that blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed. Wow. Again, the tornado on May 20th, 2013 connects to the tornado on June 20th, 2025. And the first F5 tornado in 4 times 3 years on June 20th, 2025 connects with exactly 4 times 3 months to the predicted return of the 44th president to the White House on January 20th, 2029. And so from the inauguration, the first one of the president, through these 2 tornadoes, we connect to the return of the 44th president to the White House and another inauguration. That is amazing. I'll repeat it. It's 4 years and 4 months plus the 4 times 3 years, and then 4 times 3 months from the second tornado to the return of the 44th president to the White House. And as I'll explain, tornadoes are all about Obama, because his rise to the president's office essentially occurred when he pulled away from Hillary Clinton in the primaries on Super Tuesday, which was the day of the deadliest tornado outbreak in U.S. history, until another one during his presidency, which was also pointing to Barack Obama. I'll get to that in a second. So tornadoes are all about Barack Obama. And we have, through these 2 tornadoes, connections between the 2 inaugurations, the future predicted one. And by the way, the tornado was in Oklahoma, which hints at Obama. It rhymes with Obama for this reason. Well, yes, what I'm saying is that God invented the native language long before the natives were even on the continent in order to give us the name Oklahoma to hint at Obama. The tornado was in Moore in the 4 times 4th semi-prime number state, and Moore is equal to 66 in simple English gematria. The 44th president is the Antichrist, whose number is 666. And by the way, the number 39 is the 6th super semi-prime number. And this Moore tornado connects through the tornado in the 39th state. Which gives us another 666. Because of the 66 that equals to Moore, and the state 39, which hints at 6. Also, 39 arguably hints at 9 minus 3, or 3 minus 9 to give us negative 6, if you will. The tornado on May 20th, 2013, in the 4 times 4th semi-prime number state, is exactly 188 months before the return of the 44th president to the White House on January 20th, 2029. Again, the tornado that touched down at 2:56 p.m., which ends at 4 times 4 times 4 times 4, was exactly 4 years and 4 months after the inauguration of the 44th president. This is astounding beyond words. What can I tell you? As I just said, the tornadoes are all about Obama because of the tornado outbreak named the Super Tuesday tornado outbreak, when Obama basically became the president. And we have this prophetic tornado in Moore, Oklahoma, as in Obama, in the 4 times 4th semi-prime number state. And it occurred exactly 188 months, as in whoa exclamation mark, before the big whoa return of the 44th president to the White House on January 20th, 2029. And that's why there are so many exclamation marks right here. And furthermore, as I said, this tornado had all of the 4s in it because of the time it touched down, which hinted at 4 to the power of 4. And it was 4 years and 4 months after the inauguration of the first 44th president. The first inauguration. And again, it was in the 4 times 4th semi-prime number state. But it connects with 188 months. I'm just repeating it a third time here because it's that amazing and important. That's how important this tornado is. Do you see? The tornado on May 20th, 2013 was exactly 13 squared months after the shooters killed 13 people in the Columbine school massacre. Gunshots symbolize the shots that are the mark of the Antichrist in Revelation chapter 13. And this was the symbolic beginning of the mass school shootings and the trend of mass shootings in general. And the reason for that is because that was the beginning of the baby boomers' children, the peak of them being in high school. Because it is judgment, the murder of baby boomers' children is judgment for them condoning other people's murder of their unborn babies, which was legalized for the baby boomer generation, so that they could be appeased and live out their adult lifestyles of choice. And that's why also following the high school mass shootings were in the 2000s, the university shootings, which coincided with the peak of the baby boomers' kids in university. Okay. So anyway, this tornado was exactly the 13th squared months after the shooters killed 13 people in the Columbine massacre, the number 13 because of the Revelation, book of Revelation, and more about the mark, and gunshots symbolize the mark. Things that come out of guns and go into people symbolize the mark, the thing that comes out of things and go into people. In the Bible, the number 13 is symbolic of the Antichrist. The tornado persisted for 13 plus 13 plus 13 minutes. Wow, I forgot that. And that also connects to the tornado in the 39th state, because the tornado went for 39 minutes. And that's notable. That's a long time for a tornado. And that's why this connects to the tornado in the 39th state. With the 145 months, which again hints at 188. So, by the way, too, this tornado connects with the 188 number to the tornado in the 39th state, but it also connects with 188 months exactly to the return of the 44th president to the White House at his inauguration in 2029. So there's two connections from this tornado, in other words, that involve a number of months that involve 188. That's a woe in itself. I just want to repeat, though, this is amazing. This 39th state tornado, the first since this other tornado that lasted for 39 minutes, which is 13 plus 13 plus 13, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And again, this tornado was exactly the 13th squared number of months before the 13 people died in the Columbine school massacre, because gunshots symbolize the mark, which is described in the Revelation chapter 13. The tornado on May 20th, 2013 killed 7 children when a wall collapsed on them in Plaza Towers Elementary School. The wall collapsed hints at the book of Joshua and the walls of security that collapsed, which hints at Trump and trumpets, as does Plaza Towers in the name of the elementary school because of Trump Tower, who again descended the Trump Tower golden escalator exactly 188 months after the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California, which, by the way, is in the desert, and so is Jericho in Israel. The 7 children died in the tornado was exactly 70 plus 70, I forget what, before Trump's inauguration. Okay, that would be, yeah, that would be 70 plus 70 months. Wow, that's a 3 sets of 7. Wow. To Trump's inauguration? When, of course, he was also again trumpeting the border wall of security? And the border with the Gulf of Mexico being renamed on that day with the flurries and the flurry of executive orders. But anyway, 7 children plus 70 months exactly to Trump's inauguration. 3 sets of 7, border wall of security collapsing. And again, the children died when the wall collapsed. Whoa, whoa. See, I wrote, there's just so much information regarding God's signs on a daily basis. I completely forget what I wrote even the previous day, let alone a few weeks ago, which is when this email was written. I've forgotten all of this information, right? I'm just going through it with you. I'm relearning it along with you. But I know all the basics of how everything works, and so it all is clear to me, and so I'm able to explain it, like no problem. But I'm just saying, I forget all of the details here. But this is a 3 sets of 7, and so I'm getting excited, like I did the first time when I discovered it. Of course, it's tragic that 7 children died. But this is clearly Trump. And also, it's Plaza Towers. This is huge. This is so huge. This is, like, beyond a doubt, connection from God. Because the wall collapsed on them. There's 7 of them. The Israelites marched around the walls of security of Jericho once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they blew 7 trumpets and marched around 7 times. 3 sets of 7. The walls collapsed on the 7 children in a school named Plaza Towers, which hints at Trump. And it was 70 plus 70 months exactly to the inauguration of Trump. And on his first inauguration, he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. 73 days after he won by 77 electoral votes. 73 weeks after he descended the Trump Tower escalator. 188 months after the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. Wow. And again, whoa, here we go again. And again, the inauguration was exactly 37 weeks, as in 3 sets of 7 border walls of security collapsing, before the June 20th, 2025 tornado was upgraded to EF5 on October 6th, 2025. During Trump's inauguration, Carrie Underwood's performance was a prophetic sign that pointed to 1 Kings 18. The tornado on May 20th, 2013 was exactly 11 years and 8 months, which hints at 1 Kings 18, before Trump's inauguration and Underwood's performance. That's another amazing connection. Carrie Underwood hints at the wood that was carried up on top of Mount Carmel and the defeat of the 450 false prophets. Trump was the 45th president. 3 large jars of water were poured on the wooden altar. 4 large jars were poured on the wooden altar 3 times, which gives us 444, which hints at the 44th president, and the 450 false prophets of Baal and the 400 false prophets of Ashtoreth that were defeated. In 1 Kings 18, hence the 11 years and 8 months connection. There wouldn't be another EF5 tornado for 4 plus 4 plus 4 years after the tornado in the 4 times 4th semi-prime number state on May 20th, 2013. That again touched down at 2:56 p.m., which ends at 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. Anyway, door equals 4, because the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. And this was exactly 4 plus 4 plus 4 years, this tornado. Okay, it wasn't an exact number of years to the tornado this year. It was 4 plus 4 plus 4 years in 1 month. But it was exactly 4 plus 4 plus 4 years. This tornado that hinted at the number 4, and again was 4 years and 4 months after the inauguration of the 44th president. Okay, it was exactly 4 plus 4 plus 4 years before Mr. Door of the TV show Cheers died. The reason why he is Mr. Door is because his character was known for walking through the door at the bottom of the stairwell that led to the entrance of the bar Cheers, and then giving some funny one-liner before he would sit on his bar stool and drink a beer. That was the character Norm. That was what he was known for. He was known for entering the door and everyone in the bar shouting his name, Norm, after he would say, "Good afternoon, everybody," and then give his one-liner. Okay? So he's Mr. Door, but it also, the door at the entrance to Cheers was at the bottom of the stairwell, which hints at the door that's opened in the 5th trumpet judgment to the bottomless pit. In fact, this is just coming to me now, but Cheers probably came to me earlier, but I forgot. But Cheers in itself is ironic because the opposite is the sentiment regarding the emergence of demons from the bottomless pit. It's not happy. Anyway, so this day that Norm died, Mr. Door, was the day the Pope exited the Vatican walls to enter the outside the walls basilica. The name of the basilica, outside the walls, because it is outside the walls of the Vatican. And the Pope, who is symbolic of the Antichrist, because popes are lowercase a antichrists, exited the walls on this day, in other words, exited the door on the day that Mr. Door died. just prior to this, Pope Francis was involved in the once in 25-year ritual around Christmas involving knocking on doors. He knocked on 5 of them because it hints at the door that's opened in the 5th trumpet judgment, through which the demons will pass through and then resurrect him. Okay, and Mr. Door died, and the Pope exited the walls and the door of the Vatican exactly 44 months before the predicted return of the 44th president to the White House, which has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, and is located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. That's why it's astounding that because again, in God's signs, door is equal to the number 4. And so Mr. Door died exactly 44 months before the return of the 44th president to the White House. The predicted return on January 20th, 2029. And again, Mr. Door died, as in Mr. number 4, 4 plus 4 plus 4 years after the tornado that gave us all of these numbers of 4. In the 4 times 4th semi-prime number of state, and the time it touched down. It's amazing. God uses records for signs. The National Weather Service upgraded a tornado that occurred on June 20th, 2025, that was the first EF5 tornado in 12 years. This pointed to the extremely prophetic EF tornado on May 20th, 2013, that was previously unrecognized, which killed 12 plus 12 people and injured 212 people, 12 years before the next EF5 tornado. This tornado was exactly 4 years and 4 months after the inauguration of the 44th president, Barack Obama. The tornado was in Moore, Oklahoma, which hints at Obama. Moore is an anagram for Rome, right? Rome is the seat of the first of the 2 antichrists. Oklahoma rhymes with Obama. Barack Obama is the second of the 2 antichrists. The chronological order of the names of Moore and Oklahoma in Moore, Oklahoma, convey the chronological order of the 2 antichrists in Revelation chapter 13. The name Barack Obama is equal to 68 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. The tornado in Moore, Oklahoma was 68 days after Pope Francis was elected Pope on 3/13 in the year 313. 68 days is also 6 plus 6 plus 6.6% of a year, which sets the Antichrist, 666, whose name Barack Obama is equal to 68. But again, so the Moore tornado, like I said, connects to the tornado in the 39th state. I should say the tornado that persisted for 39 minutes connects to the tornado in the 39th state because 39 again hints at Pope Francis. 3 times 13 hints at the date 313 Pope Francis was elected, which was 68 days before this tornado that lasted for 39 minutes. Or I should say 3 times 39 minutes. So in other words, the date 313 when the Pope was elected connects with 68 days, which hints at Obama, to the tornado in Oklahoma that lasted for 3 times 13 minutes. The date 313 connects to the tornado that lasted for 3 times 13 minutes and identifies both antichrists because Moore is an anagram for Rome. And 68 days earlier was the election of the Pope on the date 313 in Rome. Wow. Yeah. It's just so amazing how much revelation these tornadoes provide us. On October 6, 2025, the National Weather Service upgraded the tornado in the 13 plus 13 plus 13th state, which pointed to the EF5 tornado in Moore in the year 13 that lasted for 13 plus 13 plus 13 minutes, that pointed to the election of the Pope in Rome, an anagram for Moore that hints, which is what Moore hints at with the anagram, on the date 313 in 13. And 13 plus 13 plus 13 is 3 times 13. Moore is an anagram for Rome. October 6th, 2015 gives us 10 plus 6 plus 25 equals 41, which is the 13th prime number. October 6th, 2025 was 13 plus 13 days after Charlie, whose name means free man, James, who was the first apostle to be martyred, Kirk, whose name means church, was shot, which is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, S-H-O-T, in Orem. Orem is also an anagram for Rome. And in ancient Norse language means serpent, as in dragon. 13 plus 13 days is also 18 plus 8 days, which is at H188, whoa, exclamation mark. So, these tornadoes also connect to the shooting of Kirk in Orem. Just like Moore, Orem is an anagram for Rome. Because the tornado was upgraded 13 plus 13 days after Kirk's shooting in Orem. And again, all of this points back to the tornado in the 3 times 13th state, which connects to the tornado in Moore that lasted for 3 times 13 minutes, which connects with the day the Pope was elected on the date 313. Because Rome converted to Catholicism in the year 313 AD. Because Roman Catholicism isn't Christianity, and God absolutely hates Catholicism. But make no mistake, I'm not saying God hates Catholics. Don't misinterpret this. I'm saying that it's a false religion. There's nothing wrong with saying that. I'm not saying I hate people. You can say another religion isn't the true religion without being a hater. Okay, so relax. If you're a Catholic, don't be offended. I'm not saying I hate you. I'm saying, like a Muslim would say, your religion isn't the true one. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you do react in any way and think that I'm a hater, etc., you are a person of the left. And that's why you aren't a Christian. You are the intolerant one. You are the one that's intolerant of intolerance. It's a play on words there. You know what I mean, right? The left has an intolerance for intolerance, essentially. The modern left. So this amazing story of signs continues. Okay, so this is the update that I wrote today, a few hours ago. Trump's demolition of part of the White House that began on October 20th, 2025 is exactly 13 plus 13 plus 13 months, which is also the 6th super semi-prime number of months, which is also 39 months, which hints at 3 nines. The number 9 is the most important number in God's signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. 999 flipped upside down is 666. And this is also 3 times 13 months. which since at the date the Pope was elected on the date 313, because Rome converted to Catholicism in 313 AD. Okay, all of this connection between this demolition of Trump of part of the White House on October 20th, today, has these connections that I just mentioned before Obama's predicted return to the White House on January 20th, 2029. 39 months is 3 times 13 months. Pope Francis was elected on the date 313 and 13, and Rome converted to Catholicism in 313 AD. The 39th president was the first to host a pope at the White House in the autumn of 79. 79 is the 22nd prime number, which symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. This is 36 years, as again, 36 is 3 sixes and 6 times 6, and 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals, all the way up to 36 equals 666. And the 36th number in the triangle of numbers that has 36 rows, the last number is 666. And so the 39th president, the 3 times 13th president, welcomed the first pope to the White House in the autumn of 79, 36 years before the autumn of 2015, when Obama hosted Pope Francis at the White House. Now, the demolition for part of the White House is to build Trump's new ballroom. That's the story on this October 20th date. Trump's new ballroom is meant to host dignitaries such as the Pope. From the Pope's visit on October 6th, 1979, it was 5 times 7 years, 11 months, and 17 days to the meeting of Pope Francis and Obama in the White House garden on September 23rd, 2015. The year 15 gives us the 6th semi-prime number, or the 2 times 3rd semi-prime number. And that's relevant, as I'll explain in a minute. But Obama wore jersey number 23. And he constructed a basketball court at the White House. This 5 times 7 years, 11 months and 17 days connection hints at vaccine, which equals 57 in simple English gematria. I-57, which connects Chicago to Cairo, Illinois, which sits at the king of Egypt, which in the Bible is symbolic of the Antichrist king. And the 11 months and 17 days hints at H1117, the word for Obama, proper noun, which referred in the Bible to the high places, a euphemism in the Bible for the false religious worship that the Jews would conduct on tops of mountains. And Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And the name Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barak means lightning, Obama means high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, as for example it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place, metaphor for heaven. And O in the language Jesus would have spoken is from. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And so when this prediction comes to pass, stop playing the Antichrist guessing game. And Zechariah 11:17, which is a description of the Antichrist, whom God calls his worthless servant, and Leviticus 11:17, which is the first mention of the word owl in the Bible, because the Antichrist was known for being a night owl in the White House. in stark contrast with his predecessor, the evangelical president, who was known for being an early bird. And the contrast was designed by God in order to identify Barack Obama as the Antichrist through Leviticus 11:17, which points to Zechariah 11:17 and H 1117. Okay, so that's the reason for this 5 times 7 years, 11 months and 17 days connection between Obama at the White House with the Pope and the first Pope at the White House. But this is really specific. It really is not necessary. We have also the 36 years because they were both in the autumn of their years. And 36 is 666. And it was from the year 79, which is the mark of the Antichrist. Okay. Now, October 20th this year was exactly 4 months after the tornado in the 39th state, which caused 3 deaths, which gives us, again, the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. The tornado was the first EF5 in 3 times 4 years. It was the first EF5 tornado in years, and it occurred exactly 5 months after Trump's inauguration and return to the White House. Okay, we've stated that before, but yeah, the EF5 was 5 months after Trump's inauguration, okay? Demolition began on part of the White House on October 20th. This destruction is a parallel to damage done to a building done by a tornado. Okay, if you look at an image of the demolition so far, it would be similar to what it would look like to a building or a house after it had been struck by a tornado. That's the parallel here. This demolition is for Trump's new ballroom, which the media is reporting will cost $250 million. 25 is the 9th semi-prime number. This demolition began exactly 9 months after Trump's inauguration and return to the White House. This demolition in the White House, 9 months after Trump returned to the White House, and it's reported on this day, it will cost $250 million, and 25 is the 9th semi-prime number. The ballroom will become the 44th semi-prime number room of the White House, 133rd room. The Antichrist 44th president will return to the White House exactly 2 times 3 semi-prime number of months after the demolition began. In other words, 39 months. Okay, and this demolition began 4 months after the tornado in the 39th state that killed 3 people, which gives us the 3 transgressions and for 4, but it connects the tornado in the 39th state to Trump's demolition of the White House, which is 39 months exactly to Obama's return to the White House. In other words, let's go back to Obama's inauguration of the 44th president in 2009. It connects with 4 years and 4 months to the Moore tornado, which lasted for 39 minutes, which connected with the number 188 to the tornado in the 39th state, which killed 3 people. Exactly 4 months, which gives us for 3 transgressions and for 4, to Trump's demolition at the White House, which is then 39 months to Obama's predicted return and inauguration at the White House. So from Obama's first inauguration in 2009 to the predicted inauguration in 2029, we have a tornado that lasted for 39 minutes, a tornado that touched down in the 39th state, and then Trump's White House demolition, which is like a tornado, exactly 39 months before Obama's return to the White House. That's amazing. Okay, now, the Antichrist 44th president will return to the White House exactly the 2 times semi-prime number of months after the demolition. The 44th president is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 and who had a basketball court constructed at the White House. So this construction of a new ballroom that requires demolition points to Barack Obama's construction of the basketball court, because he's the basketball president who wore number 23. And we have this connection of 2 times 3 semi-prime number of months from the construction of the ballroom and demolition to Barack Obama, the basketball president's return to the White House that has a basketball court that he constructed because he wore number 23 in high school. It's amazing. These tornadoes continue to give us so much profound revelation. The basketball president who wore jersey number 23 was inaugurated in 2009. This was exactly 9 months this exact 9 months from Trump's return to the White House to Trump's demolition of part of the White House, followed by 2 times 3 super semi-prime number of months to Obama's, who wore number 23, predicted return to the White House, is a pairing of 9 and 23 that confirms the signs and connections. Because God pairs 9, 23, and 44 together to confirm his signs and connections, as I mentioned earlier. It requires second and third witnesses, and the building blocks of God's big picture of signs are these numbers that are paired together to provide second witnesses. And again, I know the numbers, and they are 9, 23, and 44, because the president, the 44th, was inaugurated in 2009, and he wore jersey number 23, and he constructed a basketball court at the White House, which is why it connects to Trump's ballroom, which will be the 44th semi-prime number room. Without the ballroom, the White House has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms. It's located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. Well, anyway, this is amazing beyond words, because Trump's inauguration, in other words, connects to Obama's inauguration predicted in the future with the number 9 and 23. 9 months and then 2 times 3 super semi-prime number of months to construction at the White House, and that's because Obama, who was the basketball president, who won 23, constructed a basketball court. The demolition of part of the White House began on the 61st birthday of Kamala Harris, who, in God's signs, is Jezebel, who was recently part of the last White House administration, and who Trump recently defeated in the election. The ballroom will become the 44th semi-prime number room, in addition to the 44 plus 44 plus 44 existing rooms at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. The 44th president was born in 61. And it's, again, this demolition began on her 61st birthday. 61 is the 6 plus 6 plus 6th prime number. The 44th president is predicted to return to the White House as a result of a plane crash involving Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom. Newsom was in the news on Harris's 61st birthday for criticizing Trump's construction of a new ballroom. on the day Trump began demolition of the part of the White House for the new ballroom. Okay? Newsom was in the news on this day. And so was, and it was Harris's birthday, her 61st, prophetic 61st. The plane crash is predicted to occur in St. Louis on August 2nd, 2028, 1,017 days after Newsom criticized Trump's construction of a new ballroom on Harris's 61st birthday. Their flight path will mirror that of the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse that peaked over St. Louis at 1:17 p.m., which is the reason for the 1,017 days connection. Speaking of construction, Kamala Harris was born 1 year, 8 months, and 8 days after construction began on the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, which is why her death will be next to the Gateway Arch, which will be symbolism for planes, airs, prince of the power of the air, and the Gateway Arch being symbolic of a portal through which the demons will cross through and demonically possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist through the prince of the power of the air and 5G frequencies. Okay. On the day that demolition began on part of the White House mansion, Jeff Bezos of Amazon sold his mansion for $63 million, which is at 3 sixes and 666. And God uses records for signs. This sale of his mansion was a record for the 42nd state of Washington. Okay, and 42 is a number in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the Antichrist, and rather the period of the Antichrist. And the state of Washington hints at America, because Washington is symbolism for America, George Washington. But also the White House mansion is in Washington, D.C. His sale of his mansion earned him, Jeff Bezos, a $25 million profit on the day. And on the day of the sale of the mansion, the media reported that Trump's new ballroom will cost $250 million. And that's the new ballroom at the mansion. So we have these 225 numbers in association with the mansion on the same day. 25 is the 9th semi-prime number, and this day was exactly 9 months after Trump returned to the White House mansion. 9 months is also prophetic because it symbolizes birth pains, which Jesus mentioned when he spoke about the timing of the end times to his apostles as a metaphor. Also, on the day of the founder of Amazon's sale of his mansion, Amazon's cloud internet services experienced widespread outages. Coincidentally, 2 Amazon stories on the same day. Outages of the internet are a parallel with the destruction of part of the White House mansion, which again is symbolic of a tornado. On the day of the destruction of part of the White House mansion in Washington, Bezos' mansion was sold in Seattle, Washington, and the baseball team for Seattle, Washington, lost the American League Championship Series to the Toronto, which rhymes with tornado, Blue Jays. Gavin Newsom, the 42nd mayor of San Francisco, which hints at Pope Francis, criticized the construction of Trump's new ballroom at the White House mansion in Washington on the day that Bezos' mansion sold for a record $63 million, as in 666, in the 42nd state of Washington. Newsom is predicted to die in a plane crash in a baseball stadium while he is returning to California after the predicted funeral of President Trump in Washington. And the plane crash is predicted to be a result of a bird strike, which is what the team Blue Jays hints at. Blue Jays are a type of bird, which is why they beat the team from Seattle, Washington on this day that Gavin criticized Trump's demolition and construction at the White House mansion in Washington. The Blue Jays beat the team from Washington. His plane will be returning from Washington for Trump's funeral. He criticized Trump's demolition and construction. He criticized Trump's construction of a ballroom. He's the 42nd mayor. The Blue Jays beat the 42nd state. Gavin's predicted to crash into a baseball stadium. The Blue Jays are a baseball team. His crash is predicted to be due to a bird strike. Blue Jays are birds. This will pave the way for the Antichrist. Bezos' mansion in the 42nd state in Washington, on the day that the team from Washington lost, was sold for a record for that state, $63 million, which is at 666, the Antichrist, who will move back into the White House in Washington, in the White House mansion, which will have the 44th semi-prime number of rooms with the addition of the ballroom, which the 42nd mayor of San Francisco, as in Pope Francis, criticized. And he will die later because of his criticism. Not only that, but that's a symptom of it, if you know what I'm talking about. He will pave the way for Michelle Obama to return to the White House, with Barack Obama as her vice president. Michelle Obama will be the 49th president, which is why it is predicted that Gavin Newsom will be in a plane along with the 49th vice president, Kamala Harris. Which is why Gavin Newsom criticized Trump's ballroom at the White House mansion on Kamala Harris's prophetic 61st birthday, which pointed to the Antichrist who was born in 61. Newsom was the 42nd mayor of San Francisco, and his criticism of Trump's 44th semi-prime number room at the White House is exactly 39 months before the predicted return of the 44th president to the White House mansion. The 39th president was the first to host a president at the White House, and this was 36 years before Obama hosted Pope Francis at the White House, as in the mayor of San Francisco. On the day that the 42nd mayor of San Francisco criticized construction at the White House mansion, Bezos' mansion in the 42nd state sold for a record $63 million, 666. All of this confirms that the 44th president and Pope Francis will meet again on the world stage as the two antichrists, after Obama is returned to the White House and Pope Francis is resurrected. The team from Seattle in the 42nd state of Washington lost Game 7 to the Toronto Blue Jays by a score of 3-4. And also they lost the series 3-4. Paul Simon is symbolism for the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. And he is symbolism for 9/11, as I explained earlier. Simon performed the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live after 9/11, and he performed his song about the Graceland Mansion from his 7th album at the White House Mansion in Washington on April 10th, 2024, 9 months and 11 days before Trump returned to the White House Mansion in Washington on January 20th, 2025. Okay? So let's go over that again. By the way, on 9/11, it was two planes that struck two towers 17 minutes apart. 2 times 17 is 34, which is how 9/11 symbolizes for 3 transgressions and for 4. Which is again an idiom that means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been reached, and now judgment is unavoidable. And that was the warning on 9/11. And again, Paul Simon's death will be the bookend to the warning, meaning that when he dies, it will be symbolism that the judgment is now unavoidable. The period or opportunity for America to repent is finished. So, Simon is known to be an avid baseball fan. We have here the team from Seattle in the 42nd state of Washington. They lost Game 7 with a score of 3-4 and the series 3-4. And Paul Simon is symbolism for the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. And he's symbolism for 9/11, which is symbolism for 3 transgressions and for 4, as I just explained. Simon performed the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live, okay, and he performed the song Graceland. He performed his song about the Graceland Mansion from his 7th album, which parallels this Game 7, at the White House Mansion in Washington on April 10th last year, 9 months and 11 days, which is Simon symbolism, before Trump returned to the White House Mansion in Washington. And that day is, by the way, 9 months and 11 days before Paul Simon is predicted to slip and fall on October 31st and injure his head, which I failed to mention in this paragraph. But also, this day, January 20th, was exactly 9 months before Trump began demolition on part of the White House Mansion in Washington, on the day that Bezos' mansion in Seattle, Washington sold for a record amount, and the day that the Seattle, Washington baseball team lost Game 7 by a score of 3-4, and the series 3-4. And Paul Simon's new album is 7 Psalms. Okay, that's October 20th we're talking about. This 9 months after the inauguration, which was 9 months and 11 days after Simon sang Graceland at the White House Mansion. So we have mansion, mansion, mansion. White House, White House, White House. Simon's performance at the White House, 9 months, 11 days to Trump returning to the White House, 9 months to Trump's demolition at the White House. Okay? Now, from Trump's demolition at the White House, it is in turn 11 days before Simon is predicted to fall and injure his head. As I just said, it was 9 months and 11 days, but that's broken into 9 months and 11 days through Trump's demolition at the White House. In other words, I knew this 9 months and 11 days a long time ago, but I didn't know that God was going to provide a sign on the interval day, connecting exactly 9 months and then a further 11 days. But I already knew that Simon performed at the White House 9 months and 11 days before Trump returned to the White House, and I knew that Paul Simon would slip and fall 9 months and 11 days after Trump returned to the White House. But now it's 9 months to the demolition, and then 11 days to Simon slipping and falling, which is 9/11, and Simon is symbolism for 9/11. It's amazing, beyond words. Now, on the day of Trump's return to the White House, there was a prophetic sound of silence. Paul Simon's first hit, of course, is Sound of Silence, during the performance of Carrie Underwood at the inauguration. And Carrie Underwood is known for having fallen and injuring her head at her home in the 4x4th state, which hints at Elvis Presley's home in the 4x4th state, the Graceland Mansion, which Paul Simon sings about. And he sang about at his performance at the White House 9 months and 11 days before Trump's return to the White House and his home, and the sound of silence during the inauguration when the power cut out during Carrie Underwood's performance. And again, this was 9 months to his demolition at the White House Mansion. And then from this October 20th date, today, is 11 days to Simon's predicted fall and injury of his head. Okay, so again, the performance of Simon at the White House connected with 9 months and 11 days to the performance of, on the day of Trump's return to the White House, of another music performer, Carrie Underwood. And she had a sound of silence sign because the power cut out, and she ended up having to sing a cappella. But prior to that, it was a brief, awkward sound of silence, as is described in the book of Revelation 8:1, which is why Paul Simon is the prophetic sign for all of this, pointing to Revelation chapter 8, because his song is the sound of silence. Okay, and anyway, Carrie Underwood is known for falling and injuring her head, but not just anywhere. It was at her home in the 4x4th state. And the 44th president is predicted to return to the White House mansion, but also Paul Simon's song Graceland is about Elvis, the King of Rock's home and mansion in the 4x4th state. And also Elvis Presley died from a head injury after he fell in his home. Many professionals now believe that he didn't die from drugs. He was taking the drugs to compensate for the autoimmune diseases that he had as a result of his head injury. And Paul Simon is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head and then die. Five days later after he slips, on the date 11/5, which hints at 11 times 5 equals 55, and Paul Simon sang about going to the White House mansion, Elvis Presley's home, while traveling up the I-55. Which all points to the fifth trumpet judgment, as I explained earlier, which is about the demonic possession, which is why the symbolism of the injury of the head, because the demons will possess people through their brains, through the 5G frequencies that will trigger the transistors and engender delta brainwaves, which will facilitate mass demonic possession of people. And all of this is described in the 7 trumpet judgments, which is why the 7th album and also Graceland and also the 7 Psalms album, which hints at the 7 trumpets of judgment that follow in the chapter 8 and beginning with the sound of silence, which is why Paul Simon. Paul Simon is known to be an avid baseball fan. Demolition began at the White House mansion in Washington on the same day that Bezos' mansion was sold in Seattle, Washington, which was also the day that the Seattle, Washington baseball team lost Game 7 by a score of 3-4. Simon's recent album is 7 Psalms, and his 7th album contains the song about the King of Rock and Roll's Graceland mansion. Simon's first album, Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., hints at For 3 Transgressions and for 4, Wednesday, the 4th day of the week, 3 a.m. being the 4th watch. A God pairs 9 and 44. As I explained, Simon performed Graceland from his 7th album 9 months and 11 days before the sound of silence when Trump returned to the White House mansion, which was exactly 9 months before Trump began demolition on part of the White House mansion in Washington and Bezos' sale of his mansion in Seattle, Washington, and the Seattle, Washington baseball team losing game number 7 by a score of 3-4, and the series 3-4. These mansion signs on October 20th, 2025 are 4 times 4 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will die from his head injury. And again, Elvis, who died at Graceland, died from a head injury, ultimately. Simon's predicted death on November 5th, 2025 is, and Graceland is in the 4x4th state. So this date, 11/5, the date it's predicted that Paul Simon will die from his head injury, is 4 times 4 days, and then 9 months after the sound of silence at Trump's inauguration, which is a pairing of 9 and 44, which confirms the signs and connections, because the 44th president was inaugurated in 09, which is exactly 4 years, the inauguration, and the sound of silence is exactly 4 years before it is predicted that the 44th president will return to the White House mansion, which will have the 44th semi-prime number of rooms after the ballroom is added, which is being constructed, which is the sign on October 20th. Not only did Seattle lose the game 3-4, but they lost the series 3-4, which hints at 3 for 3 transgressions and for 4. Seattle plays in their stadium near the Space Needle, which is symbolism in God's signs for the mark of the Antichrist, because space hints at the transhumanism aspect of the mark of the Antichrist, and the needle obviously hints at what we know as the thing, right? The SHOT. So that's why the space needle in Seattle is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. And here we have, on this day, Seattle losing the series here, right? 3-4 at a score of 3-4, which hints at for 3 transgressions and for 4, which hints at Paul Simon's death from a head injury, which is symbolic of the demonic possession of people's brains after they take the space needle. Seattle lost on Kamala's 6 + 6 + 6th prime number birthday. And this date was 360, which hints at 3 6s and 666 days after Kamala and Michelle Obama were together for a political rally in Kalamazoo, as in Kamala, Michigan, on October 26, 2024. Kamala was the 49th vice president, and 227 is the 49th prime number. Kamala and Michelle were in Kalamazoo, as in Kamala and Kalamazoo, 22,700 days, which hints at 227, the 49th prime number. So 22,700 days exactly. Kamala and Michelle were in Kalamazoo, 22,700 days exactly, after Elvis Presley spent the night in Kalama, Washington, when he went to Seattle for the filming of the movie It Happened at the World's Fair. The Space Needle was constructed and opened for the World's Fair. Elvis popularized vaccines for the baby boomer generation, which are needles, when he publicly took the polio thing on October 28th, 1956, exactly 9, as in the number that symbolizes judgment, years before construction was completed at the Gateway Arch in St. Louis near Little Egypt, where Memphis and the Graceland Mansion is. Elvis's hit song, Little Egypt, was released on his 9th movie soundtrack album, which confirms the 9 years connection. Elvis's time at the Space Needle and Kalama in Washington connected to Kamala and Michelle in Kalamazoo while campaigning for the White House mansion in Washington, which connected to Kamala's birthday and the demolition at the White House mansion in Washington, which connects to the date that Michelle is predicted to return with the 44th president to the White House mansion in Washington, and connects with 4 times 4 days to the date of the predicted death of the musician who sang in the White House mansion about Elvis's Graceland mansion in the 4 times 4th state. Okay, so again, Kamala Harris's birthday connects all of this. It connects again with 360 days to the Kalamazoo day with Kamala, which connects to Kalama, where Elvis was in Kalama at the Space Needle, okay? And Kamala Harris's birthday on the day of the demolition of the White House, on the day of the Seattle, Washington signs, and the mansion sale and the White House mansion, connects with 4 times 4 days to the predicted death of the musician who sang in the White House mansion about Elvis's Graceland mansion and home in the 4 times 4th state, which is why the 4 times 4 days connection. It's absolutely amazing. All right, I thought, because like I said, I wrote the email like a couple of weeks ago, and there's just so much happening on a daily basis that I forget what's what. But I thought that I had included somewhere in the email thread the mention of the prophetic tornado outbreaks. Well, I already really explained the first one, which is why all of this is related to Barack Obama. The Super Tuesday outbreak in February of 2008, I believe it was the 5th of the month, was the day that Obama broke away from Hillary Clinton and thus securing him the nomination and therefore the White House. That was the big day, and that's why God highlighted that day with the prophetic tornado outbreak, which incidentally, well, you know what? maybe I need to go back because it hit the 4 times fourth state. And anyway, there was the tornado in Nashville that's related to all this too. There's got to be somewhere. Okay, now I remember. So now I know why it's confusing. All of this other tornado information is in another video that was posted recently, which is the prediction for the Blue Jays, the Toronto Blue Jays win of the World Series. And I'm going to leave it there. I'll leave it at that. You need to watch the other. Obviously, the wise person will recognize when the prediction comes to pass, that they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. And so all of the other tornado information is in the other video. And the reason why it's there is because Toronto rhymes with tornado. But the other outbreak, because the Super Tuesday outbreak was the deadliest in U.S. history until a few years later with the super outbreak, what was called the super tornado outbreak. And that was on April 27th, 2011, the same day that Barack Obama released his digital format only long form birth certificate after Trump had called him out on it for so long, which was a forgery. The biggest fraud in history. And it was proven to be a forgery, by the way, by the sheriff of the sixth biggest county or city in the U.S., who outsourced the digital document to 2 forensic labs in Europe to get impartiality, which came back proven to be obvious forgeries with 9 points of obvious forgery. It was a layered document, easily discerned, and the mainstream media, of course, never reported this except for the local TV news stations in Phoenix, where the sheriff is located. So that's why you don't know that, of course, because it's all Antichrist. You are being deceived if you are on the left. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.